Hi, yes, we are good to go. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for waiting. Let's get started. Good evening and welcome. It's so great to see you all here. I know it's a Saturday evening. It's been a long week. You just want to relax, but it's exciting to see such high participation numbers. I believe we have 145 participants in here already. So we truly hope today's session is beneficial and well worth your time, right? But before we begin our workshop on how to make a presentation, we'd quickly like to introduce you all to Spark and tell you a little bit more about us and the motivation behind this initiative. So very quickly, just a bit about us. I graduated, my name is Anusha Pusaluri, first of all. I graduated with my BTech in Pharmaceutical Sciences and Technology at Institute of Chemical Technology in 2013. After that, I went to University of California, Santa Barbara, to get my PhD in chemical engineering. Over there, I worked with Professor Samir Mitragotri, and my PhD work was on trying to develop better cancer treatment strategies. After that, I joined a biotech company in Boston, and I work in the formulation and process development department as a scientist. And over the years, I've gained experience in bioengineering, drug delivery, and formulations. I still have a lot to learn. But that's a bit about me. And now I'll let Amar, my partner in crime, introduce himself before taking it forward. So over to you, Amar.
Thanks, Anu. Good morning, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. So like Anu, I also graduated from ICT with my BTech Pharma degree. After that, I worked for 2 years at Professor Patravale's lab. Then I moved to the US to get my PhD in chemical engineering. Graduated from Georgia Tech in 2019, and I've been working at Amgen as a process development scientist since. As for my research area, so for my PhD, I worked on using protein engineering for vaccine design for infectious diseases. And currently at Amgen, I work in downstream bioprocess development. Anu, back to you.
All right, thanks, Amar. We also have some very distinguished guests in our audience today. The Vice Chancellor of ICT is here, Professor Pandit. We have Professor Vanna Patravale, Professor Ratnesh, faculty at ICT, and you'll hear from them later. But before that, we just wanted to quickly talk about the motivation behind this initiative. Why did we start this initiative? So Amar and I, time and again, reflect on our academic and professional journeys. We think we're doing okay so far, but recently we started thinking about the things that could have gone better, right? Like just given the times. So for example, when I came to the US, I was not good at many of the basic skills necessary to conduct experiments during my PhD or even present my findings. And some of you may be thinking, sure, what's the problem? Isn't that why you go to get a PhD? The problem was that our friends and colleagues from other countries or institutions seemed to already know them or be much better at them. And so we felt like we had a steeper learning curve, if you will. And that might have put us a step behind than the rest. And it's not just us. Several of our undergraduate friends who have completely different professional journeys than us, right? They also felt very similarly. So as we thought a bit more about why this was the case, one of the things that really stood out was that there were not a lot of formal mentorship programs in place. And even the mentorship programs in place were severely underutilized. And, in addition to your technical training, these programs, I think, are a wonderful opportunity to learn about crucial skills necessary to become the best and to excel in whatever you're planning to do next. It's not just the technical training, right? So I certainly found many mentorship programs that I participated in during my PhD to be very useful in my development. And so that's where Spark comes in. We are a mentoring initiative, and through our programs, we aim to help you navigate these challenges better so that you don't have to face the same problems that we did. So how can we achieve this? To begin with, we identified 5 programs that we thought would be very beneficial. You can see them listed here. We have workshops, an effective way to educate you on important soft skills. We have a career guidance kind of program where the idea is to give you better tools for career planning. Presentation training where we can provide you with personalized feedback for your upcoming conference or poster presentations in a small group setting or in a one-on-one basis. For the scientific audience in you, journal clubs, so that can help develop the scientific critiquing abilities and a habit of keeping abreast with some recent literature. And finally, also having maybe office hours where you can meet with people like us who have gone through the same journeys that you guys have, and on a one-on-one basis, ask for any professional or informal guidance. So we think all of these are great. And personally, I would have loved to have them during my undergraduate years. But honestly, this is not about us. This is about you guys. So what we did was we rolled out surveys to see how useful you thought these programs were and how likely you were to participate in them. And a lot of you gave us very good feedback. So here I'm showing you the responses we received from the surveys we rolled out. And it shows how likely you are to participate in each of these programs. So for each circle around the program icon, you can see several sections. The gray, red, and yellow sections show how many of you are not that likely to participate in the program. You're not that interested. And the green and blue sections show how many of you are highly likely to participate, right? So overall, I would say we received overwhelmingly positive responses. A majority of you think that all of these programs would be beneficial. But two options really stood out amongst these, and those were the workshops and the career guidance programs. About 90% of you indicated that you're highly likely to participate in these programs. So we based our initial efforts on these survey results, and the programs we came up with are really driven by what you find most valuable, right? So we have two seminar series for now. I'm sure you probably have already seen the flyers circulating. So I won't go into much detail, but just very quickly, I'll touch upon them. One will be a series of workshops here to your left, and that will focus on various soft skills that is necessary for your development. And the other series will focus on the career guidance aspect. So over here. And we have really tried to make our topics as comprehensive and exhaustive as possible. For example, in the workshop series, you'll learn about presentation skills, communication skills, basically things you'll need for whatever you plan to do next, right? And in the career guidance series, you'll hear from several ICT alumni pursuing a variety of professions, anything from becoming a professor to becoming an entrepreneur. Also, we put a lot of thought into choosing the right speakers. It was a big effort of our whole initiative. First of all, these are all people who graduated within the past decade or so and exactly relate and still remember the things you're going through. They can identify your pain points, right? Second, we try to include a very diverse set of speakers, be it coming from different backgrounds or pursuing different careers or even gender diversity for that matter, so that each one of you is able to connect and identify with at least one of them, if not more. That was very crucial for us. And finally, we were very mindful of choosing the right speakers for each talk. So for example, you'll hear from Suchitra over here later, and she got her MBA in human resources after her BTech in textiles and is currently a talent acquisition manager, right? And she will talk to you about getting resumes and how to do about writing your resumes and how to conduct yourself during job interviews, because she does that for a living. She knows exactly what you need to be doing and what works and what doesn't work. Later, you'll also hear from Swapnil over here, and he actually spun out a technology that he and a few others worked on during their time at ICT and founded a company called Science for Society. So you'll hear from him during the entrepreneurship session. And that's what I mean. And finally, we also are doing this effort in collaboration with the Institute of Chemical Technology at Mumbai, right? It's not just us, the faculty and professors at ICT do think that these sessions would be very valuable in your development and fully endorse this initiative. And I'll let them speak about what they think. As I said, we're very fortunate to have ICT's Vice Chancellor and Head of the Institute, Professor Pandit, with us here today at this inaugural event. Thank you so much for being here, Professor. Would you like to say a few words to kick us off? Professor
Yes,
Pandit?
indeed. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here. And I think, yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Or
Yes, we
okay,
can.
thanks.
Yeah.
Right, good evening, good morning, or whoever, as correctly pointed out by Amar. And I'm extremely happy to be here addressing you all. I don't want to give a big speech, but as you correctly pointed out, as Anu correctly pointed out, that you have chosen people who have gone and felt the pain points during their ICT days. And it is an attempt to address those pain points so that we are better off tomorrow. Now, my observation in the past, I have been in ICT for the past now almost 40 years or so. So I have seen the kind of a progression and the type of students which are entering ICT. In terms of their native intellect, you find that the students have a better intellectual capability. But if you find in terms of their communication skill, it is going down. And when I talk to someone who graduated 30 years ago, 40 years ago, their means of communication, their ways of communication, their command on English was so very different as compared to what we see today. And there are two specific reasons which I have identified. That previously we used to get students only top one or two students from each of the states from all over India, whereas subsequently we started getting students from rural background. The percentage qualification did not change, but in terms of their communication skill, they did suffer. And if I want to draw an analogy, this is an analogy. In earlier days, Indian cricket team used to have people coming only from metros. You'll have few people from Bombay, few from Delhi, few from Chennai, and very rarely you will find people coming from rural India. But you see in the past 15 years, 20 years, Bombay is nowhere, Delhi is struggling, Chennai is struggling, Karnataka has come up, Nagpur has come up. What it clearly indicates that the talent is there, but at the same time, you'll find that these students, when they go into an Indian test team, they find very difficult to express themselves. And you can see the subsequent post-match interviews. Somebody has to communicate in Hindi, somebody has to communicate in Haryanvi, somebody has to communicate in English. I'll just tell you one classic example. You all know Dilip Vengsarkar was a great cricketer, absolutely great batsman, and he would have been captain barring his ability to speak and express himself. You should have listened to him and you would realize why he was not selected as a captain. Though in terms of all the cricketing abilities, it was the top rank. So the issue here is you all know, you all understand, you are capable, but expressing that you know that is the most difficult thing, and that is what you find it difficult to express. So clearing your skills or developing your skills in terms of expressing your own ability and expressing your own capability is as important, if not more important, in today's scenario as compared to what it was earlier, because of the extreme competition which is there. And I keep telling my students that they should keep on reading the English newspaper, at least the editorial of an English newspaper, to develop a command how English as a language is used, how it can be constructed, how sentences can be constructed. My entire education was in vernacular medium. So I'm from Balmond Vidya Mandir, so I studied everything Marathi till first year science, where I started learning in English. But subsequent to that, you develop liking for English literature. You start talking in English, you start thinking in English. And many a times, what you find today is people think in their own vernacular language, translate it into English, and then express it. So, what is required is essentially you start thinking in the language of communication. Now, that is a skill set which you acquire over it. And once you have that skill set, your presentation skills also improve. So I'm really very happy that you have chosen the correct and absolutely spot on topics in addressing this soft skill requirements, which is where the ICT students lack, mainly because of their varying background, which was earlier different and today it is different. So I compliment you for taking this particular initiative and organizing these events. And all the very best. I hope you will record all these and make it available to a larger audience in due course of time, so that even if they have missed it this time, they would be in a position to listen to it at a future date. Thank you very much for asking me to say a few words here, and I'm most delighted to inaugurate this particular session. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think you captured what we had to say very, very aptly. Those are exactly the reasons why we started this initiative. We also feel that we are a very talented set of students, but often it doesn't come across, the talent doesn't come across, and that's where we really want to help the students and push them to be able to achieve whatever they really want to achieve, truly want to achieve. So thank you so much, Professor, and definitely we'll keep in mind everything that you said. We are actually recording the sessions and making it available, and this sessions and all the other sessions will be freely available to everybody. The intent is to help and touch as many lives as possible, right? So hopefully you all also agree with what Professor Pandit has said. And thank you, sir, for taking the time out and being with us here today. We're really happy to have you inaugurate the event. And for supporting this initiative, we hope it's helpful to the students too. Okay, and next I'd like to introduce Professor Vanna Patravale, who has been actively advising us on how to make this effort as effective as possible for you guys. And she has been enthusiastic about this program from the get-go, right? So we are so fortunate to have her as an advisor. Ma'am, would you like to say a few words?
Thanks, Anu, and hello, everyone. So it is said, wherever you go, whatever you pursue, you have to fulfill the trust which is reposed in you by your nation, by your parents, and by your alma mater. And believe me, dear students, all our alumni really, really make us proud because they are ever ready to give back in whatever best possible way to the society. Training current students and equipping them with the skill set which is actually required to face the future challenges is one such important activity. And both Amar and Anu, former students, as you have seen, of Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences and Technology at ICT, have joined hands to start this mentorship initiative called as Spark to complement and support your growth. In fact, both were meritorious students, let me tell you, and still they are saying that they did face challenges. And you heard Anu speak about those challenges. But they are now working for you. This is their way of giving back to alma mater, and which we appreciate a lot. You just heard her what they have in store for you in terms of workshop series, also in terms of career guidance series. Believe me, this is more than 6 to 8 months of work. They have gone a very systematic way. You have just seen how they've taken actually feedback from you all students. Then they started networking with fellow colleagues, and very clearly they told me that they'll select the younger ones because they feel it is with those people that you will be able to actually relate very well. When they fixed up the date times, not only that, I appreciate the efforts they've taken even to select the titles. The titles are so exciting that even I feel like attending each and every session, and I'm sure I'll do so. So that just shows how passionate both of them are to deliver whatever is best for you. So dear students, please take benefit of this. Personally, I believe that all the sessions will be highly, very, very useful for you all. It will definitely mold you into holistic technologist. And that is our motto, right, at ICT? So wishing this mentorship initiative a great success, and definitely Anu and Amar, you made us proud. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you so much, ma'am. Those are really kind words. We really appreciate all your help too. Yes, as you heard, ma'am, we really want to make this as useful and as beneficial to you guys as possible. We absolutely agree. So yeah, so with that, we are very happy to get this initiative going. Hopefully you all got a sense of what Spark is. Again, we're very, very excited. This is definitely not the end of what we have in store, not just these 2 series. We plan to make it more comprehensive and are working behind the scenes to include more programs. You can check us out at www.sparkmentoring.info. We just have a basic website up and running, so that's where you can get more info. You can follow us on our social media handles. I'm sure most of you already are, right? And definitely do reach out to us and let us know if you have any thoughts or feedback on what more we can do for you guys. We are all ears. We really want to make this as beneficial to you guys as possible. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up my spiel here and get into the actual topic for today. It's a presentation on how to make an effective presentation. Sounds kind of like Inception, I know. But this is a very useful skill to have, so let's get into it. And before beginning, just some housekeeping. I just wanna talk about some logistics. As we progress, you probably will have several questions, and we encourage you to post them on Pigeonhole. You can see the link here. Please go to www.pigeonhole.at. It's already up and live. You just need to enter the code 16Jan21, and you'll go onto a page where you can ask any question, right? You can also ask these questions anonymously. You can already see other questions posted. So if you like a question somebody else has posted, please do upvote it. And the more upvotes a question gets, the more likely it gets answered, right? And also don't worry if this link or the slide goes away. The link will be posted in the chat window. One of our people will be posting it. And definitely do post questions as they come to you. Don't wait till the end, because sometimes you can lose track of what you wanted to ask and it's not fresh in your mind. Second, we will send you the slide deck and additional resources. As you already probably heard, we are recording this session. All of these will be available to you after our presentation. Please don't feel compelled to take notes. We'd rather have you focus on the talk. Try to actively think about the tips and practices we'll be suggesting and sharing today. See if we are applying it in the presentation. It will help you understand the content we are putting across better. And finally, if there are any issues, please post them in the chat. One of our people will try to resolve them as soon as possible. Okay, so with that, let's get into the topic. Right, so presentations, they are key to communicating your ideas in almost every profession in this age. I don't have to stress this point too much because you probably already made countless presentations by now. So you get the idea, right? They're very, very important. But why make a good presentation? Emphasis on the good, right? The reason is straightforward. Majority of the people are visual learners. Scientists call it pictorial superiority. And apparently visual information is 6.5 times more effective at communicating your message. And so because a presentation is an audio and a visual form of communication, it really highlights the importance of creating slides that are effective, because that's what people are going to see, right? And I've heard people say so many times that good slides can do most of your job, and I tend to agree. Now, anyone can put together a bunch of slides and make a presentation, but making a good presentation actually takes a lot of work. It's an art and a skill. It develops with time and practice. And I'll admit it, honestly speaking, even we are learning. We are not good at it. You can always improve, right? So today in the talk, we'll cover some tips and practices for making good and effective presentations. And this is the outline of the talk. The talk will be divided into 3 main parts: a guide for making the presentation, a case study, and Q&A. Specifically in the guide, we will discuss things that you need to do even before designing your slides, cover some strategies on how to creatively design your slides, and share some best practices for delivering your talks and tackling the Q&A section. In the case study, we will deconstruct a talk to illustrate the points we are making of the talk in the guide better, and hopefully that will reinforce and drive home the points we are trying to make. And finally, we'll end the session with a Q&A. Great. So before getting into the guide, I just want to make, again, 2 quick disclaimers. We simply don't have the time to go over all the practices essential to make effective presentations today. There's tons and tons of stuff. We don't have the time to go over them today. We'll discuss only a few of the very important points today. And the points not covered today, we'll discuss them in detail in the handouts and resources that we will circulate amongst you guys later, so you can review them at your leisure. Second, there's no one size fits all. We are just sharing some general good practices that will work in most cases, but there will be deviations and adjustments depending on the kind of talk you're planning to give. And we'll cover some of that and discuss a bit more about that in the course of this presentation. Okay, so let's begin before making your slides. The first tip we have for you here today is, drum roll, don't build your slides first. Again, don't build your slides first. You know, it may sound counterintuitive and some of you may be disagreeing with me now, but hopefully after going through this slide, you will get a better sense of why you shouldn't, right? What you instead need to do is understand a few things first. What is the goal of your presentation? Articulate clearly in your mind or on a pen and paper, what is it that you're trying to convey? Are you reporting your results and convincing the audience about something? Is it a pitch for a business idea? Do you want to attract investors? Or things of that sort, right? If you wanted someone who's listening to your talk to take away 3 key things from your presentation, what would they be? Write that down, because that will really help set the tone of your presentation, you know, and depending on the goal, the same content will have to be presented differently in different talks. The next thing you have to think about is, who is your audience? You know, study your audience, understand them. It will help tailor your presentation accordingly. You know, for example, if you give examples that they understand and resonate with, it will keep them more engaged and attentive, and your message will be delivered more effectively. It will show that you put in a lot of work, right? Third, why should they care? If you can't come up with a clear answer for this, then really there's no point in even making the presentation, because there is no motivation for an audience member to listen to your talk, okay? So these are the things that you need to think about and get them answered. Once you've answered these questions, the next thing you need to do is organize your thoughts and contents. And that really resolves the question of how you want to convey your message, okay? So there are some tips over here. First, definitely review all the content that you have from the perspective of the audience, right? Try to give it some structure so it's easy to follow. Develop a story if possible. And this is very crucial, right? Humans love to listen to stories, and we've been doing that ever since we've evolved. Physically sketch out the story on a paper if it's possible, or write it in a Word doc, okay? And what this will help you do is understand exactly what each slide should convey. And a good tip is to include that key takeaway for that slide in the heading. So for example, here our key takeaway is, don't build your slides first. So at the end, when you have all of this together and you put all your slides together, it should reflect that structure or story, you know. And just to give you a little bit more color on this, right? For this presentation, Amar and I had a lot of material, as I alluded to at the start of this presentation. We reviewed it. We knew that we can't go over everything, identified the most important points, and then gave it some sort of a logical structure. The structure being the chronological order while making the slides. So what to do before designing your slides, suggestions for making the slides, then how do you deliver the talk and tackle the Q&A. So that's how a person is going to go through their presentation in a timely fashion. So it makes sense when you are listening to what we are trying to say. You know, in contrast, imagine I just put together 5 slides with 10 suggestions in each slide. By the time I would have reached the 3rd slide, you probably would have forgotten what I spoke in the 1st slide and immediately lost interest. So that's what I mean by this. Try to give it some structure, some logical flow, develop a story if possible. Sometimes the story is not possible, like today, I'm not able to develop a story for this content, but definitely able to give a logical structure. Now, lastly, you also need to consider the time. Based on the time you have, you may or may not be able to cover all of your content. Often you'll have to get rid of things that may be super critical to that may not be super critical to your story. Just keep the important points. And just like what we did today, right? We don't have the time to go over everything, something like that. Now, Why are these exercises important? I think they're really important because they help cut down all the work that you have to do later. Basically, you won't have to endlessly refine your presentation because it's not delivering the message the way you want it to, right? Because you would have already thought about your key points, reviewed it from your audience's perspective, and you won't be wondering if you'll have the same takeaway that you want them to. So you may still not be in agreement with me, but as we go through the rest of the presentation, you'll see us refer to this exercise time and again, and hopefully that will convince you that this is a very important exercise to do. So that brings us to the second section, designing your slides. This is probably going to be the biggest part of what you will do while delivering a presentation. You'll spend a lot of time doing this. So let's see what some strategies we can use to make great slides. Okay, so here they are, and we'll go through them one by one. The first one is having an outline and a roadmap. Okay, so set the stage for the audience. Tell the audience what to expect, right? What do you want to tell? What is the payoff? You know, remember the exercise we just did before making the slides. That can come in really handy here when you have all of those points thought out. It will help you make your outline and set the stage, set the story, so your audience knows what to expect. If you've clearly established this, then an audience member won't be lost. You know, the last thing you want an audience member to be is lost, because then they'll zone out and all the effort you've put into your slides and the presentation has gone to vain. They're not even going to listen to what you have to say. And there are a couple of really good ways by which you can do this. I'm sure many of you know how to do this, but let's just go through them. You know, one of the examples is what we did today, just have an outline and pull it up constantly while switching sections. So it's reinforced in people's mind, like what we have done here. You know exactly that you're in the designing your slides section under the guide, right? Another way would be to have a tracker at the bottom of your slides, like what you can see over here. You know, you can show all the sections and basically highlight the section you're currently in. So right now the guide is highlighted at the bottom of the slide because we are in the guide section. Say we were in the case study would be highlighted. So that's another good way. Another good way would be to discuss all the sections at the outset. You know, tell the audience that there are going to be 3 sections. This is section 1, 2, and 3. And then based on the slide you are in, somewhere on the slide, you can discuss where that 1, 2, and 3, we are in those sections. Okay. So that's about outline and roadmap. You really want this to set the stage and hold your audience's hand throughout the presentation. Now, the next 3 points pertain to what you should be doing in each and every slide that you're designing. And we'll go through them again one by one. So the first one is less text. And before talking about this point, I just want to illustrate this point with an example, okay? So take a look at the slide, you know, tell me how the slide makes you feel. You know, comment in the chat box, let me know what you think. You know, just take a look at the slide, take 5 seconds, don't feel shy. Just let us know what you think. This point, you know, the point of this presentation is to try and see how you feel about these things and try to give you a better understanding of these things. Okay. So I see a lot of you guys are chiming in. Amar, can you just help me go through the chat and tell me what people are feeling?
Yeah, sure. So lengthy, crowded, too much information, perfect, horrible.
Yeah.
That's intense, but difficult to read, too much info. Outline is okay, subtext cluttered. Yeah, I think people are hitting on the right points.
You guys are hitting on the right points. Yeah, thanks for participating in this exercise. You're right, all of you hit the exact right points. I mean, to sum it up, all those points up, I personally feel overwhelmed when I look at this slide. And that's not a good feeling to leave your audience with. You know, overwhelmed with information is definitely not what you want to do. You know, first of all, there are 264 words in this slide. I mean, when you're flashing the slide for 10 seconds, you can't expect your audience to read those many words, right? It's not a fast reading competition. And personally, I didn't read beyond the heading. After reading the heading, I gave up, I zoned out, right? The font size is too small. When I'm a person sitting at the end of the room, I'm not going to be able to see what is said in this slide, okay? The line spacing and just the clutter. Some of you said it's too cluttered. Yes, absolutely, it's too cluttered. It just makes me feel overwhelmed. There's not enough free space around this slide, right? And there are some key messages that your audience would likely remember with them and go home with them, but they're getting lost in this. They're getting buried in this large volume of text, right? Now, imagine the same slide was presented this way, okay? This is the slide redesign, having most of the same information from the previous slide. Now, isn't this far more intuitive and easier to understand than the previous slide, right? Looking at it immediately, I know that this slide is talking about how to make a good first impression, and there are 4 key points that I need to remember when I want to make a good impression. And there are some tips in each. So think about designing your slides this way. Do try to include the key messages, and all the information that was there in the previous slide can be verbally told to your audience. You don't have to actually include all of that in your slide. So yeah, so just to sum up this point, do not include a lot of text. Keep the design clean and uncluttered. Leave empty spaces around text and images so people can absorb the information more readily and are more willing to listen to you, because if you have too much text, they're just going to be focusing on the slide and not really listening to you. So that's not a good idea either. So keep it simple, less is more, right? And this is a good rule of thumb to have, but don't go to the other extreme also and include 2 words in your slide, because that's not going to help either. You need to spell out the critical information. For example, the thing that we talked about earlier, you can use your slide headings to tell the audience what they're exactly looking at and why. So over here, we have less text and critical info will give you clear message, right? Use those creatively. And we'll talk about more about how to find the right balance in the material that we'll send out later. But just to conclude, having too much text and a cluttered slide will confuse your audience. Have the essential points in a clean format, and that will help deliver your message clearly. Great. So the next point is 1 idea per slide, okay? And a good way to achieve that is to see if you're spending more than 1 minute per slide. If you are taking more time than that, then consider splitting them into multiple slides. And we'll talk a bit more about this, but let's check out an example. Take a look at the slide and think about what the slide is trying to convey. Now, this slide does have the previous point, right? It does not have a lot of text. It does have less text and not too cluttered. So I'll leave it on for 5 seconds, and then we'll have a poll to see what you guys think this slide is trying to convey, okay? So in the meantime, we have the poll in progress. We have launched the poll, but look at this slide. Okay. I'm gonna give it 5 more seconds. Looks like we're stabilizing over here. I'm gonna end poll in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, here, I'm sharing the results with you guys. So a lot of you thought it was about memory limitations. Some of you thought why there should be 1 idea per slide. And the second highest was you guys thought it was everything. And then many other people thought it was 1 idea per slide. Okay. So no, this slide is not about memory limitations. I'm sorry to all of you who got the wrong answer. This slide is about how to convey your message. Okay. And I will not blame you for getting the wrong answer. I personally would have thought it was memory limitations too, right? I'm going to stop sharing the results here. And get back to the slide. Yeah, I personally would have thought it was about memory limitations too, right? Because there's so much information or so many ideas getting conveyed in this one single slide. So what can you do to remedy this? right? One good way to convey your message and make sure that you're hitting the right note is try to arrange all of that information with one idea per slide in a logical sequence. Okay, so consider this slide progression. You know, it's trying to convey the same message, but maybe now it will make more sense. Okay, there we go. So the first slide says, you know, short-term memory is limited to 7 small and simple things. It's stating a fact. It's probably the motivation to something coming up next. Now the second slide says, because, you know, your audience may get 1 or 2 things from your talk. So, okay, now I'm able to relate. Okay, because of our short-term memory, it allows us to remember only 7 things at a time. An audience may likely get only 1 or 2 things from my talk. So that's a problem, right? I want them to remember a lot. And now the last slide. This last slide says, build a thread to help comprehension. So I'm like, okay, so this is a resolution. Basically, this is how we can get around it. So that's what we mean by one idea per slide. Hopefully you get the point. Too many disjointed points in one slide will make it difficult for an audience member to understand your main point. Your main point will get lost. But having one idea per slide in a logical sequence effectively conveys your message. Now, sometimes there may be slide limitations. We understand that. And you know, sometimes it may also be worth having all the messages on the same slide at the end. So this is what you saw probably in before making the slide section. There were a lot of ideas. So in those cases, animations can come to your rescue. Okay, so definitely be very mindful of this point of having one idea per slide and keeping it simple. Okay, I see somebody raise their hand. I just want to encourage them to post their questions on Pigeonhole, just to make sure that we don't have a lot of interruptions. Okay, the third element of each and every single slide design that we wanted to stress on were figures. And figures are super important. This ties back to the point of us being visual learners. It effectively conveys messages, and figures are a way to do so. Okay. So remember when I presented this slide, you know, hopefully you all were able to easily compare across the different charts easily and try to understand what the slide is trying to convey. Okay. Now, had I presented that information, the very same information in this way, wouldn't it have been confusing? There's so many different axes, labels, it's hard to read, it's hard to compare across the different charts for that matter. And nobody can really answer the prompt that I have here. Here's what the students think. Me looking at this slide for 5 seconds, I wouldn't know what the students were thinking. So that's what we mean by figures. You know, when we say think about your figures, we want you to think about having relevant and clean figures because it's easier for an audience member to grasp. So when I presented the slide on the left, I had already oriented you guys to what is on the slide. So I already put the icons for each programs. And now I'm just adding these uniform pie charts around each icon. So you all can immediately understand the interest for each program and compare across different charts, right? But on the right, I'm already changing the orientation and it becomes confusing for somebody because you had not set the stage for that. So this is just one example. We'll definitely send out resources later to you guys for more creative ways on how you can show your data. We don't have the time to go over all of them here, but depending on what information you have, it might be worth considering different formats for your figures, right? So just a few points before I move on. At a minimum, use clean, clear graphics in the relevant format. If you're borrowing a figure or a chart from some other place, make sure to list the reference in your slide, okay? Then it's also important to include only the important information. If you have a lot of data and you think it's not crucial to your story, put them in the backup slides. If somebody has a question, you can refer to it back later. But you don't have to put and clutter your slide and include everything here. Try to have clean figures so people can easily understand your information. Okay. So that's about the 3 points that we want you to remember for each and every slide that you're trying to design. And the last point I wanted to cover is the visual design of each slide. Okay. So this is very important to keep in mind because having an attractive design will keep your audience member interested and engaged in your talk. So this is zooming back out a bit. So we've covered the elements for each, what to do for each slide, but now we're talking about how the slide should come together overall. Okay. So this is a little bit more advanced. Start thinking about this after nailing the 3 points that we just discussed: less text, one idea per slide, and having relevant and clean figures. So like before, like the other points, I'd like to illustrate this point too with an example and then discuss the relevant tips. Okay, so take a look at the slide. I'll let you guys digest this slide for a minute. Well, maybe not exactly a minute, but 10 seconds. Right. Aren't you already bored looking at the slide? I mean, I personally was. When I saw this slide, I was like, ugh, what is this even saying? But this slide talks about endangered species around the globe. It throws some random facts at me through bullet points. And then why is that whale even there? It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm just not interested to look at the slide. Right? It's hard to follow. It's boring. Now check this slide out. It has the exact same information in a more attractive slide design. Suddenly I'm interested to learn about endangered species around the globe because now I see a globe. And then the use of a map to exactly point out where the species are, I think is very clever. Not only is it easy to follow, but now the slide has made me curious and I'm actively trying to absorb the information and draw comparison, ooh, what's happening in the US, ooh, what's happening, elsewhere in the world. So things like that. So your slides support your story, and because visual design is so important, and having that effect is so important, having an attractive design to engage your audience is essential to your slides. So, again, going back to the points that we covered, the slide on the left does have those elements. It is less text, it is one idea per slide, but it's just boring. I don't want to look at that slide, right? So that's what we mean about zooming out and trying to stylize your slides, thinking about the organization, thinking about an attractive slide design. Some tips for those would be to use powerful images. Make sure to use sans serif font. You don't want Times New Roman. It's not a newspaper. You keep the design clean, uncluttered, and all the other tips that we talked about, leaving empty space, having consistency, stuff like that, having an easy to flow format so somebody looking at it for the first time can immediately understand what they're looking at. So there are several more tips. Again, as I alluded to, we will circulate notes and handouts later that will cover how to go over this, in more detail. So that's about the slide design. It's definitely a lot to process, all these tips. We covered a lot of information. If you are a beginner, a good idea is to nail as many points as you can from the ones that we just talked about, because some of them are very easy to accomplish. And if you're not very creative, like me, I'm not very creative. I do struggle to make attractive slides. One idea is to just Google for inspiration or watch TED Talks or Netflix documentaries like Explain, where people present more complex information, in very creative ways and easy to understand ways. So that will give you some tips and how you can do it yourself. So that brings us to the end of this part of the guide. So far in the guide, we covered what to do before making your slides, things like understanding the goal of your presentation, understanding your audience, and trying to organize your content in a logical and easy to understand format. Then we saw some good strategies for designing effective slides, like less text, one idea per slide, attractive design, stuff like that. Next, we'll be going into delivering your presentation, and Amar will go through the rest of the talk with you. But before that, we just wanted to give you a quick 5-minute break, a water break, if you will, right? Just relax, reset. I know we threw a lot of information at you. You might have a lot of questions. I saw some raised hands in between. So use this time to ask those questions on Pigeonhole if you haven't already. I'm flashing a gist of things that we've spoken so far. So maybe that will remind you of any questions that you may have lost track of. One of our members would have again reposted the link to the Pigeonhole if you lost it somewhere in the chat, right? So take a 5-minute break. It's I'm sorry, I'm trying to do time zone conversions here, but we'll be back in 5 minutes. And we'll indicate that in the chat when we'll be back soon. So definitely feel free to relax. In a minute, I'll show you how to use Pigeonhole for any of you facing any difficulties, okay? So we'll be back soon. Okay, so I did the conversion. It's 7:27 for you guys in India. We'll be back on at 7:30. Okay. I'm just going to quickly show you how to do Pigeonhole if you guys are interested. Okay. As I said, we'll be back on in a couple of minutes at 7:30 for you guys. So let me quickly show you Pigeonhole. So we'll just log on to pigeonhole.at. You will see, you'll get a place to enter your passcode, enter your event passcode here, 16 Jan 21, right? Then you can see you have a section for how to make an effective presentation, and you have the option to enter this Q&A. You can enter this Q&A. And you can see so many of you have already posted questions. Well done. We're really excited to go through these questions also. So if you have an additional question, enter your question here. You can type them here. And if somebody has already asked your question, you can always upvote the questions. So you can see this particular question has 16 upvotes. So we can address that question first, because a lot of you think that this is a very important point to cover. Hopefully you guys understood that. And then I'll let Amar take over now.
All right, Anu, looking good? Screen sharing?
Yeah, all good.
Give it one more minute.
Sure, I think another minute and then we can get going.
All right, I think we can get started now. So I hope you all found this break valuable to refresh, and you're ready for the second half of this presentation. The one thing I want to first say is, we did read every single comment that you put down in the registration form about what you're expecting from this session. We have tried to cover as much as we could back in this time, but feel free to, drop us a question at Pigeonhole like Anu just showed you if you feel something was left unanswered. And as a reminder, we will be sending out handouts after the session that will have a more detailed guide on this topic. All right, so I want to quickly recap whatever has been discussed so far. So the talk is divided into three sections, the bulk of which is the guide, and that's where we are at right now. In the first subsection, we advocate how not to build your slides first. Rather, answers these questions. What is the goal of your presentation? Who is your audience? Why should they care? And based on that, start thinking about a structure to your story. In the second subsection, we discuss strategies to design elegant, crisp, and clean slides by using less text, choosing the right kind of figures, and then focusing on good stylistics and organization. So now let's jump to our third subsection, which is on the actual presentation delivery. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about here is how delivering presentations and talking to a big group of people does not come naturally to most people. It does not come naturally to me. This is something that makes a lot of us uncomfortable, and feeling nervous is very common. And like I said, I'll admit I feel terribly nervous when I have to present. On the other end of that spectrum, you have people who are extremely eloquent, they are very confident speakers, but because of that, they might come to a presentation unprepared. So winging it is also a big problem. And in doing that, you will oftentimes, you won't realize that you might end up missing main points. So a remedy to both of these scenarios is practicing your presentation. And I cannot emphasize this point enough. You must prepare well, and there's really no substitute for that. Write down exactly what you want to say, and if not for all slides, you want to at least do that for your key slides. uh, Anu and I actually we practiced this talk at least 6 times with a different group of people. We got feedback from them, and then separately both of us must have practiced our bits a couple of times. So do some practice rounds by yourself. Recording yourself helps a lot of people. Find friends or colleagues or people in your lab that you can practice with. These wonderful and nearly perfect TED Talks that you look at, even they involve hours and hours of practice. CEOs who give these captivating talks, they practice them a gazillion times. And personally, for me, I think practicing is a biggest remedy to my nervousness. So once again, cannot emphasize on this point enough. Now, aside from practicing, there are several other tips on presentation delivery. And what we've done is we've grouped them into three categories here. The first one relates to your actual slides. The second one talks about some good oratory practices on how to actually speak or talk. And on the third one, we'll touch on what kind of preparation is important. So we'll look at them one at a time. Now, the first and the very important thing is please do not read your slides. This can single-handedly make your talk fail. This is extremely boring for the audience. You are going to very quickly lose your audience. Now, to address this, what you can do is you can write out a transcript, practice it enough times so you know what to say. At least do it for the key slides. And a related point here is if you've designed your slides well with less text, enough cues for you to know what to say, that can also do a big part of your job. The second point is walking people through your slides. So what I mean by this is, say you have a slide which has a figure on the left, there's some cartoon and some other table on the right. When you show up that slide, you want to actually orient your audience to what is going on. You can't directly jump to the conclusion. So something like, there is this figure on the left which talks about the population distribution in these different regions. The y-axis shows the population, the x-axis shows the different regions. The bar in red shows something, the bar in green shows whatever it does. So, do that and orient your audience. You don't want to assume that your audience will know everything that shows up on the slide. The third one here is to simplify. Now, we've seen this idea in the context of slide design, but what I mean by simplifying here is in terms of your presentation delivery. So avoid jargon. This comes with knowing your audience. You can already anticipate if there are terms that your audience might not know. So define those necessary terms. Otherwise, using shorter sentences is much better than using longer sentences. You don't necessarily need to use a fantastic vocabulary during your talk. Simple is usually better. And then there are many other strategies, such as using analogies for your talks, that is going to help your audience follow. The last one on this subsection is using smooth transitions. So as an example, say you have a slide where you're discussing some data, and then you jump to, say, a conclusion for that. So before showing up the next slide, it's a good idea to give the audience a preview of what is going to come. So, having seen this data, next we did XYZ, and then you show up the slide that talks about XYZ. All right. The next subsection here relates to oration. And the first point here is engaging with the audience. So several things to talk about here. The first one is maintaining eye contact. Now, in a conference room type setting, this is really essential. And what you can do is pick 3 or 4 people and keep maintaining eye contact with them. In doing that, you will make sure that you're not looking at your slides, not facing your back towards the audience. And this is something that will make the audience feel more engaged. Other things here is, moving around when you are talking, using gestures like I'm doing right now. Smiling is very powerful, makes the audience really comfortable and engaged. Uh, Other ideas here are involve your audience. So by having questions, polls like we are doing right now. And the last thing here is, be yourself. Everyone has their own style. This is something you will learn with time. If, for example, humor is not your style, you don't necessarily need to force that. The next point here has a lot of sub points here, all very important. The first one there is volume. So imagine if I was speaking at this volume, or if I was speaking at this volume. So, these are both extremes you don't want to be at. So just strike that balance, and generally the volume you want to speak at is a notch more than what you ideally would talk in colloquially. The second one here is monotone. So talking in monotones can be extremely boring, so incorporate some amount of intonation in your speech. The third one is spacing. So being native Indian speakers, we tend to talk fast in most of our Indian languages, and that makes us talk very fast even in English. So talk slowly. It helps the audience follow and understand. This is something even I am practicing myself. The last one here is enunciation. So enunciate words clearly. For example, rather than saying commendable, say commendable. All right. Uh, the third point here is pauses. So pauses can be extremely powerful when they are made either before or after a substantial statement. So, for example, before you have a key takeaway, you could pause or say something like, take a moment to think about this, and then pause again. If you noticed, Anu did this earlier in the talk when she brought up the first slide on how not to build your slide. She said that point, and then there was a small pause, and hopefully that helped you appreciate how important that point is. The last one here is on repetition. So repetition is really important, and it can help you reinforce your message. An example is doing these mid-presentation summaries like we are doing here. So, you could pause and then review important points. The other thing is, if you know that there are 2 or 3 key important takeaways that you want people to take away with them, repeat them multiple times. Use phrases like you say a point and then say in other words and then rephrase that. Or you could say the one thing I want you to take away from this presentation is, and then say it. All right, so that was everything related to oration. The last subtopic here is on preparation. So we have 2 points to talk about here. The first one is timing yourself. Now, this is, I think, also very important. You don't want to be the person who talks for 17 or 20 minutes when you're allotted only 15 minutes. At many conferences, there's a strict deadline. You can't exceed 15 minutes, and then if you do that, you will end up rushing through your more important slides later. Now, this is something that will come with practice. If you've practiced enough times, you will know if you're hitting that time mark correctly. The second one is avoiding technical trouble. So if say you have the opportunity to do this, if you have a important presentation, if you have access to that conference room the day before, do a mock presentation in that same room. Make sure your pointer is working. Make sure that the colors you see on your laptop screen is how you're going to see them on the projector. Even in a virtual type presentation like this, Zoom was actually new to both me and Anu. So we made sure that we did two of our mock presentations on Zoom so that we understand how to use the interface. All right, so to summarize this section on presentation delivery, the one thing I want you to take away from here is there is no substitute to practicing. And if you think you've practiced enough, you haven't. And besides practicing, we looked at some other tips and strategies, which we've grouped into 3 sections here. The first one relating to slides, second on oration, and third on preparation. Next, we'll jump to our final section within the guide, where we'll talk about how one can prepare for the Q&A session. Now, we have 5 important points to discuss here, but before that, there are 3 other important points that I want to talk about. So the first one is anything that you put on your slide is game for Q&A. So if you have data, if you have figure, you must absolutely know everything about it, and you should be able to answer any questions around that. Related to that is, you know your content, you know your talk, so you should be able to anticipate many of the questions that are going to be asked. So prepare for that. Prepare for those questions beforehand. And again, related to that is if you know that there are likely going to be some questions, if there is some data, some figures, some tables, which is going to help you answer those questions better, have them in your backup slides or in your appendix. All right, so with that, the 5 other things we want to discuss here is one, repeating your question. So this is especially important when you are in a conference room type setting. So there might be people in the back who may not have heard the question clearly. So it's a good idea to repeat the question rather than starting to answer right away. And the other thing you can do here is before answering, you can say, hey, okay, so there are 2 things here. There are 3 things here. It gives a good structure to the audience member when they hear a question answered in that format. The second thing is to pause to think before you answer. Now, it's completely okay to take 5 or 10 seconds to gather your thoughts and come up with a coherent answer rather than jumping to it right away. And this is something that might even make you look a little more intelligent. The third one, this is my pet peeve. So being succinct when you answer. I've seen talks where there's 5 minutes allotted for the Q&A. The first question is asked and the person keeps talking for 4.5 minutes, and there's not enough time left for any other questions. So don't do that. Be on point, understand how much time you have, and you can pretty much summarize your answer in like 1 or 2 points, and you can always clarify with the person if you were able to answer their question correctly. The next one is, you will likely have hard questions asked. There's no reason to take that personally. Be professional and do not be aggressive in answering those questions. And last, related to that is, there might be hard questions and there might be a time when you do not know the answer to the question. So there's no need to BS. It's completely okay to say, I do not know the answer to this question. And it's a good practice to then follow up with that person after you've done your research and can answer them by email or in person later. But also, I don't know cannot be the answer to all of your questions. All right. So this brings us to the end of our guide section. And I want to do a quick recap here. So first, we talked about what one must do before you even open or start making your slides. So do not jump to building your slides first. Think about the whats and the hows and the whos, And based on that, develop a structure and try to weave your content together. Second, we looked at some elements of good slide design, having less text, use of good colors, good organization, one idea per slide, etc. Third, we learned some best practices for the actual talking. Most important point, practice well. Other ideas like slide reading, hitting the right volume, pace, to just name a few. And then lastly, we saw how one can prepare for the Q&A section. Anything you put on your slides, you must know about, anticipate possible questions in advance, etc. All right. So now our next section for today is a case study, and the purpose of including this section here is to hopefully kind of give you like a real example to see how all of these things that we discussed earlier in the guide can be incorporated. What we'll do here is we'll go through a 3-minute thesis talk given by our very own Anusha about 2 years ago as a part of her PhD program. We're going to first look at a YouTube video of her actual talk. That will be followed by a poll. We'll be asking you 2 questions just to see what you felt about the slide design for that presentation and her actual delivery. And then lastly, what we'll do is we'll go in and deconstruct her presentation. We'll see what was done well, what was done poorly, what could be improved about that presentation. All right, now just a heads up here, during our practice talks, we realize that there's going to be some lag and the volume also may not be optimal, but this will still be good enough for getting our point across. So I'm going to play this video. It's only 3 minutes. It'll be a good break from my voice.
Drone strikes, a surgically precise tool for targeted terrorist killing with minimal damage to human lives. But are they? 7 strikes were necessary to kill Mehsood, a Taliban terrorist. Not bad, you think at first, until you realize 164 innocent men, women, and children were killed in an effort to eliminate just one bad guy. Are innocent killings a necessary evil then? Or should we avoid drone strikes and let terrorists proliferate? Or is there a better way to eliminate them? Unfortunately, I do not have an answer for you. But what I'm about to tell you is how we're solving an identical conundrum in the field of biology and disease, cancer. Just like terrorists, cancer cells infiltrate healthy organs, multiply incessantly, and disguise themselves so efficiently that it becomes very hard to distinguish them from innocent healthy cells and selectively kill them. Researchers from early on have identified that while attacking a cancer cell is crucial, what is key for effective treatment is to simultaneously avoid the healthy cells. Biomissiles loaded with toxic drugs as payloads have been designed to selectively seek a cancer tissue. Our cancer-seeking strategies are still not very efficient, though, requiring heavy drug loading of this toxic payload. Unfortunately, the flip side to this heavy drug loading is the undesirable release of the drug to healthy cells. This affects them and often leads to life-threatening side effects where doctors are forced to stop treatment. Just like airstrikes, researchers hope that these missiles target cancer cells exclusively, but often this targeting is marginal. Sure, we don't always get what we hope for, but can we do better? In my research, instead of searching for more efficient cancer-seeking strategies, we re-evaluated and posed the question distinct from others. We asked, with the existing cancer-seeking strategies, can we design a payload that is more toxic to a cancer cell and less toxic to a healthy cell? And in doing so, can we find a much reduced amount of payload? If yes, how do we do it? Turns out there's an ingenious way by which this can be achieved. Instead of delivering one drug, if we deliver 2 drugs, we can reduce the amount of drug payload needed by several folds. And not just this, by some clever design and loading precise amounts of these drugs into these biomissiles, we can make a payload benign to healthy cells, yet retaining extremely high toxicities towards cancer cells. With our biomissile, we saw a 10-fold improvement in the cell killing effect as compared to a controlled treatment. And not just that, we saw negligible cell killing to a healthy cell population, and this is remarkable. Our cancer treatment strategies today are not the most selective, but with a little thought from outside the box, we hope to have engineered a surgically precise tool for targeted cancer killing. Thank you.
right. So at this point, what we'll do is, I hope you were able to, view this case study talk and analyze it for its content and design and delivery. So we have two poll questions for you, and I see people have already started responding. So we'll give it a few seconds. Perfect. Okay. So for the first one, I see what do you think of slide design? Most of you said needs some improvement. Good. Honest feedback is always good. Uh, and then for the delivery, could use minor improvements. Absolutely. So I'm going to stop sharing the results. Okay. So now what I want to do is we'll go in and kind of deconstruct this presentation in light of things that we looked at earlier in the talk. So we'll go over that now. But the first thing is I know for a fact that Anu actually practiced this talk more than 10 times, by herself, with friends, with her lab colleagues. So that is important and it shows. Uh, there was no slide reading. She was facing the audience most of the time. She did walk the audience through the slides, and she even uses the pointer at times to orient or guide the audience as to where they should be looking. uh, as far as engaging with the audience is concerned, I think she was looking at the audience most of the time. She was using gestures to engage with the audience. The one thing I wanted to point out here is you may have noticed that she was probably moving a little too much, and that can be sometimes distracting. The few other things, I mean, the most important thing I thought could use improvement was her pace. I felt that she was too fast, and that even felt a little intense at times. Regarding pauses, so one point where she could have introduced a pause was between the first slide and the second one, where she makes this analogy of drone strikes and then jumps to the second one. So a pause would have been very powerful there. Instead, I think there was an unintended pause somewhere on the second slide where she is discussing the content in the context of cancer, and that might, I think that was because she was out of breath, which again ties back to speaking too fast. All right, so that was a breakdown of the case study that you looked at, and I hope that gives you some sense of how one or you can improve for your own presentations. All right, so this brings us closer to the end of today's talk, and what I'll do is I want to recap one more time everything that we've talked about so far. Within the guide section, we first talked about things one must do before you even make your slides. Don't jump to building your slides first. Think about these questions, the whats and the hows and the whos, and use that to develop a structure. Second, we looked at some elements of good slide design, like less text, use good colors, good organization, make it more appealing for the audience. Third, we looked at some best practices for the actual talking. Practice well, do not read your slides, using the right volume, intonations, and so on and so forth. And then fourth, we saw how to prepare for your Q&A, anticipate questions in advance, be professional, etc. In the case study, we looked at a 3-minute thesis pitch by Anusha, and then we unpacked it to see what was done well and what could use some improvement. Now, okay, now, we understand that we've discussed a lot of information with you in the past 45 minutes or 1 hour, and maybe some of you or most of you are thinking, hey, this is too much. I'm overwhelmed with information. So how do I go about this? Now, I'll tell you, I felt something similarly a while ago. So, 6 months before my actual PhD defense presentation, there's a pre-doctoral review. I actually gave a terrible talk, and my advisor saw that, and then he taught me a lot of things that we discussed today. And even he sensed that I was overwhelmed with information. I did not know how to start, how to go about it. So what we think you could do is think about it as 3 levels. There's a basic level. Start with your slides. Think about your blueprint and your outline. Then jump to the slide design. Use clean text, use clean figures, because all of this happens even before you actually talk. And once you've gotten a good handle on that, the intermediate level 2 can be on the actual presenting. incorporate practices such as no slide reading, simplify your speech, practice well, have a transcript for what you need to exactly say. And then after that, you can then go to this advanced level where you start playing with these more complicated things like your volume, your intonation, using the right pace, trying not to use filler words, enunciation, gestures, and things of that sort. So we hope this will help you, and all of this doesn't need to be done for that same presentation. This is something that you can do over the course of years, like over time. And believe me, it does get better. I was terrible at presenting like 2 or 3 years ago, and this is still a work in progress for me as well. Now, having said that, we understand that a lot that we've discussed today is still theoretical, and sometimes it takes a lot more effort to actually put that in practice. So what we want to do is we want to take this a step further. We are willing to give you personalized feedback in a smaller group setting. So if you have a presentation that you've made in the recent past, or there is an upcoming one, what you can do is we are willing to sit down with you in a smaller group and kind of critique it in real time, and that will hopefully help you understand and use all of this information better. So there's going to be a feedback form your way towards the end of the session. Just indicate in that section if you're willing to participate in this, and we'll reach out to you and set up a time. All right, so that brings us to the Q&A section of this talk. I'm just going to pause for 30 seconds or 1 minute, and if you still have questions, please go in and drop your questions like other questions, and then we'll start addressing them soon. So giving it 30 seconds or a minute.
Amar, do we want to get started? I think
Yes.
there are quite a lot of questions already.
Yep.
And
Let me.
we might be at the top of.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No.
All right. From where to get good designs and templates for slides? Anu, I'll let you take this one.
Sure. Good question. I think Google is your best friend. Personally, that's what I've used. Personally, I know Amar uses, a lot of us use. We just Google, find templates that are most helpful based on your content. It depends also what your content is. It also sometimes is personal taste, what you find attractive, what you think your audience might find attractive. If they're young kids, use cartoons. If they're older business people, don't use cartoons. So things like that. This is a trial and error, for I think if you're struggling with specific slides, right, you can have an appropriate prompt in the Google search that you have. For example, good slide design for introducing our team, and you'll see multiple suggestions in the in the images section, and just go with whatever floats your boat, whatever clicks with you.
All right. Many of my colleagues find it difficult to present an introduction slide myself. Every some students will present an introductory slide in every presentation suggestion. I would say a good introduction slide. So you really need to bring across what is the need. Sometimes you need to give enough background to people as to why what you've done is important for them. And see, this is also something that is going to change based on what kind of talk it is. If it's a technical talk, then I think what is the unmet need and what you are doing is a good introduction slide. And yeah, basically, I think this will change also depending on what your content is. Anu, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you captured the right points. It's the introductory slide is basically once you do the exercises of what to do before making the slides, you will be very easily able to make an introductory slide because now you know exactly what the goal of this presentation is. So then that can be your introductory slide can be informed from that exercise. So if it's as Amar said, if you want to inform something and you think that your technique is going to help, then you can be like, yes, this is unsolved and we are going to solve this, stuff like that.
I just thought of a related point. So, I don't personally like surprises in my presentation. So if there is a main point, tell people beforehand what they're going to see. And then when they actually see it, it works as a, reinforcing that messaging. So be clear. I don't think this is a movie or a TV show. So yeah, so I would recommend not incorporating surprises.
Agreed.
All right.
Maybe go for the 18 words one.
Yep. The audience. Okay, that's a good question. Anu?
Sure. So the question is, what if the audience is of a diverse background? Sometimes you can have a mix of an audience, technical or a business audience, but the content is more technical. Yeah, I agree. Great question. I would say the best would be to connect with both, right? For example, if you can give examples for both your audience, you can preface it by saying something like, for the more technical audience, da 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 da, or for the more business oriented audience, da 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 da. You can do something like that. Sometimes I agree that it's not possible to do that. And then I would say, think about the goal of the presentation. If it is a pitch for a business or for where more business oriented people are going to be there and you want to attract investors, you can skip the technical details, but give the key takeaway, right? So you can say something like, our data shows that ABC is better than XYZ, things like that. So you need not cover all of the exact experiments that you did or all of the technical work that you did, but definitely inform them of the key takeaway from your technical details. And if possible, connect with both. That would be the best. Anything to add, Amar?
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, you don't have to give all the technical information because there are some business people, but it would be a good idea to have those slides in the backup, and you can allude to that in the beginning, saying that I can discuss or I can talk more about this if required as a part of the Q&A.
Yeah. Valid.
All right. PowerPoint related to a research project, considering that it will have a lot of theory, how can we be doing a visually attractive presentation? And I can take a stab at this one first. So yes, understandable, and not all of your slides will look beautiful like we said. So again, what we said, it's a general thumb rule, but things are going to change depending on what your content is. There will be exceptions, and you may not be able to have visually attractive every single slide may not be visually attractive, but you can still try to do that for some of your slides. And some slides will have more text than normal, some slides will have data, but you can still use some of these other strategies as not bringing all of that up at once. Use animation, start with one figure, walk the audience through that one, then bring up the next one. So there are still things you can do even with a lot of technical data and a lot of content.
Agreed. Just to add to that, I think, you can, for some of the words, you can try to use icons or cartoons that are already embedded in PowerPoint presentation. So you can just, insert an icon, for example, if there is an experiment, just to make it attractive, or just to add a break to your text, you can include an icon like what we did today, right? You see that we have had a lot of icons when there's a lot of text. So that will sort of keep the visual interest still in place. But I have personally seen technical talks being attractive. We can definitely share some resources with you guys. For example, Amar's defense talk was very visually attractive, even though it covered a lot of technical details. So we can definitely give you some tips on that.
All right, we'll take this one. Which is the best software to make PowerPoint? I think this is a personal choice. I am more comfortable and even familiar with MS PowerPoint. Even when we were making these presentations, I think Anu was erring a little on the side of Google Slides. I was not comfortable, but I think there are many different softwares available. You can play with them and see which one works best for you.
And just one final point, it would be good to check with wherever you're finally presenting, if whatever format you've used works with them when you're doing your technical preparation. Just make sure that there are no technical issues, that you go in with Adobe and they don't have that software on whatever system you have to present that on.
Yep. Anu, we'll take two more questions and then wrap up. We are already over time. Yeah. And then, so we do have a lot of questions. What we'll do is you can still keep posting any more questions, even say a day after this talk, you're digesting this information, something comes up. Please keep posting on Pigeonhole. It will be open. We'll look at all questions, write out answers, and then send like a compiled document with all answers. So yeah, your questions will be answered. Where do you get good themes for presentation, Anu?
I think we sort of answered that in the first this thing. I think I would say again, Google, whatever floats your boat, whatever clicks with you.
And then we'll take this last question, and then how many word font colors like
maybe just if you want to just convey, font size, font colors, if you want to take a stab at it.
Font color. Okay, so ideally, I would say the thumb rule would be, you want to use 24 point as your font size. Anything smaller than that might be difficult, but of course there will be exceptions. Font colors, I think again it's a personal choice, but still keep in mind things like contrast. If you have a white background on your slide, you can't use very, very light colors. So I think that's also something that comes with time. And what we said is, look at good presentations, look at TED Talks, Explained that Anu referred to earlier. Explained is a very good series on Netflix where they do these presentations, see these presentations. And I think over time, you will start to relate to some style, and that will help. All right. So like I said, keep posting questions. We will answer them. I want to take 2 minutes and quickly close. So you're able to see my slide again, right? Full screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So just one thing, I just wanted to point out that our next two upcoming sessions are, so the first one is a career guidance series, and Professor Prajakta Dandekar and Tej are going to talk about their journeys and their paths to academia. So this is on 30th January. Follow us on social media. You will see registration links for this session, and we hope to see you there. And then as a part of the next workshop series, the next talk is actually on how to improve your communication skills. And Rahul here will, discuss his thoughts, tips, strategies on improving your reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills. So I think that'll be a very important session. And even I am personally excited for that. All right, so we have a lot of people to thank for this initiative. Firstly, I want to thank our volunteers, Riddesh and Yash, for doing a phenomenal job behind the scenes over the past few months to make this initiative a reality. A big thank you to both of you. I want to thank Professor Pandit and Professor Patravale for endorsing this program, guiding us, and joining us today for our inaugural session. And then, equally importantly, I want to thank Dr. Ratnesh, Jash, Mitesh, and the ICT social media team for helping us spread the word about the initiative. And they've done a great job in the past, I think, week, setting up Zoom and addressing a lot of our technical issues. Few other things. So you will see at this point in the chat window, both on YouTube or on Zoom, a link to a feedback form. So feedback is really, crucial for us. It is a way for us to know if what we are doing is helping you, what we can do to improve that. So please, it'll only take 2 minutes. Do share your feedback with us. Go to our website. If you have any other questions, write to our Gmail address and we will respond to you. And other than that, if you found this session useful, spread the word. Tell your friends and colleagues about it. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks. Anu, any other closing thoughts from your end?
No, thank you so much to everybody for joining today. We hope this was informative and a good use of 1.5 hours of your Saturday. Yeah, thank you so much for participating in such high numbers. As Amar said, just let us know what you think. We really want to help as much as possible. That's our intention and that's our goal.
Perfect.
Somebody asked if there will be, oh, sure, ma'am. Just one question. I think people were asking about resources and recordings. Yes, we will share them with you. We haven't yet figured out the best format to do so, but definitely you'll be hearing from us. We have your contact details, so don't worry, it's not lost anywhere. You'll definitely hear from us. If not, definitely reach out to us. You have our email ID. And thanks to everybody leaving comments and chats. We hope we have answered some of your points over there. We appreciate your messages.
Ma'am, did you want to share anything?
I just want to wholeheartedly thank both of you, Amar and Anu. Excellent session, I would say, and looking forward to more sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Your words have honestly been very encouraging from the beginning. I mean, personally, for me, this goes back like a decade. Yeah, and like I've said before, you are a big reason why I am where I am. So thank you for all your support, even for this initiative.
Welcome anytime. Thank you.
So yeah, so feel free to log out. We'll be hanging in for a bit over here, but we're done with our session for today. Hope to see you guys in 2 weeks from now.